Coming up on Tech News Today, it's our year in review. We're going to look at some of the biggest stories that happened over the course of 2012 and what they mean to us as we wind things up and head into 2013. All that and more next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Thursday, December 27th, 2012. Tech News Today is brought to you by Ford, featuring Bliss, the blind spot information system with cross-traffic alert and active park assist. Check out these available features on the 2013 Ford Fusion and 2013 Ford Taurus and learn more at ford.com/technology. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Tom Merritt.
I'm Sarah Lane.
I'm Maya Zakhtar.
And I'm Jason Howell.
And this is the show where we are lazy and don't come in for the last week of the year. And so we do special episodes. Also, there's not a lot of tech news happens.
Well, Tom, or you can think of it as the week before we take some time off, we're extra busy, so it all evens out.
That is true.
That's true.
That is also true.
I can
All of
attest to
these
that.
statements, we deal in truth at Tech News Today. This is our year in review. We're going to talk about some of the biggest stories of the year. We broke things down into kind of categories. So Jason's going to cover the Android news, some of the Google news of the year. Ayaz is going to talk about the Microsoft news. Sarah's going to talk about the Apple news.
What? No. I don't know anything
Shocker.
about that.
And I got left with everything else. So,
you.
You know,
You've got other.
I've got
Other news is awesome.
That's called Tom couldn't figure out what to do. I think that we get a lot of flack from some people, not all people, for covering Apple too much. But the fact is, Apple does a lot of stuff. They sell a lot of products. People are interested in them, and they make news.
Yeah, and the thing is you've got your Apple fan people, then you have your Apple haters, and then there's just a lot of people in between who are sort of fascinated by the whole thing. Maybe you don't have any Apple products. Maybe you don't love them or hate them, but it is a very fascinating company, and it has been a really big year for Apple. Apple announced a new, way back in March,
Right.
It was the iPad, the new iPad.
It was the new iPad then.
It was the new iPad then. It was Retina display. It was the third gen, but they made a big deal about saying this is the new iPad. It was a very big deal. It was definitely the best iPad to date. I know Leo and I were really excited about it on iPad today. It's still the iPad that I use every day.
That's the one I used to.
Right. And so that was back on March 7th, which seems like an eon ago. But then if you think about just other hardware releases, the iPhone 5 was announced back September 12th. The iPhone 5 was, that was that was the worst kept rumor, I think, in Apple's history.
Do you remember the long march to the release date?
Oh,
Whenever
yeah.
it was like, it's coming in June. Wait, no, it's coming in August. No, it's coming in September.
And here's what it's going to look like. And here's some mock-ups. And here's what's going to be different. And most of that, it took a while, of course, to pan out, but most of that ended up being true. That was a what some would say a very lackluster announcement, even though it's the iPhone 5, if you like iPhones, is the best iPhone to date, just because there weren't a lot of surprises. And I think we've gotten to the point now where Apple might not give us a lot of surprises anymore.
Even the announcement date, the announcement of that, which took so long, and everyone already knew what it was like a month before. So like, oh, it's going to be September 12th. It'll be September 12th. And I think it was like confirmed like a week beforehand. It was another just a terrible year for secrets for Apple.
Sure. And I just don't know if Apple cares as much as it used to about that. Look at their product cycle. On October 23rd, Apple announced the iPad mini along with the 4th gen regular size Retina iPad.
The new
iPad. The new iPad, the new squared iPad, which was, again, iPad mini had been rumored for a long time. We didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, but it was one of these rumors that ended up being true.
And it was one of those Steve Jobs, one of the last I guess we'll get, of Steve Jobs saying, nobody wants a 7-inch tablet. That's just dead form factor.
Yeah,
nobody would ever wants that.
And I think a lot of people held on to that. Is this the beginning of what Steve wouldn't have done?
But it's a 7.9-inch
Right,
tablet,
is
not a
too.
7-inch iPad.
And although it didn't have Retina, which I think myself included, many people are a little confused by, it has done pretty well. A lot of the people who have gone out and gotten the mini are very happy with it and say, the full size, that 10-inch iPad is going to be a relic pretty soon. It's too big, it's too heavy. You don't need anything that big as far as tablets go. And of course, that's also Apple responding to a pretty healthy market for smaller tablets. Android tablets, Windows tablets. I mean, that Apple is no longer the only player in the tablet game. Obviously, iPads still are outselling all other kinds of tablets by a very wide margin.
But those days are numbered now.
Yeah.
For the first time, we're looking ahead to 2013 as Apple may not be dominating the entire market in tablets for the first time.
Well, and they haven't with smartphones, and I think the tablets. Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, it's pretty much the same trend. Again, how much does Apple really care as long as their market cap is crazy?
And that's the thing. As we get to the end of the year, Apple's stock was downgraded last week.
It was, yeah.
From
it
a
dipped
buy.
below 500 for the first time in several years.
Exactly. It's not that Apple is failing in any way, but it's coming down to earth a little bit.
Yeah, this year they didn't have like a giant, like revolutionary product. It was a smaller version of the iPad. It's an evolutionary jump in the iPhone. It's very incremental changes when it comes to the lines of Apple products, and we haven't seen a whole bunch of redesign or amazing looking things. I think the biggest surprise this year might have been the iMac being like super thin on one edge of it, but not a whole lot of like just huge products that people are like, oh, I must get this. I think everyone's still waiting for that Apple TV, which we didn't see.
We didn't see that this year. What we did see was iOS 6, and specifically a software product that a lot of people did not like, and that was Apple Maps.
Oh, yeah.
Apple Maps.
Don't forget about Apple Maps.
Oh, Apple Maps.
Apple Maps cost some jobs.
Yeah,
Yes,
it sure did. I mean, Scott Forstall ended up kind of being the fall guy, although depending on who you ask, it sounds like a lot of other executives from within Apple said that he was very difficult to work with. So maybe not the fall guy for no reason. But Apple Maps was, in almost any way you slice it, a total disaster. I have said, listen, it's not perfect. I don't think it's as bad as other people think, but it really depends on where you live and how good the maps are. And it caused, I think for the first time, a large number of people to say, I am not upgrading to the latest iOS, Apple iOS, because I don't want my Google Maps to go away and I don't have a good alternative. Apple had to apologize. Tim Cook issued an apology, a public apology, a written apology. It was a little signature at the end of it, and offered a bunch of different alternatives if you actually care about maps that work to their own product in the App Store. That's insane.
Yeah, and this is before Google Maps had an app for iOS, so you were stuck with.
Right.
I mean, you had Apple recommending Bing Maps. I believe they had a link to like other applications out there. It was just odd to see Apple screw up that big in such a broad stroke, because it's in all of iOS 6 and all of iPhone 5s had these, and you're like, oh wow, this is a tremendous cluster.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly was not a bad year for Apple, but probably not the best year they've ever had. And so it'll be interesting to see what they bring us in 2013. Tell you who had a revolutionary year. You can say what you think about whether it was good or bad, but Microsoft sort of stormed back into the forefront of a lot of people's minds, not just with Windows 8.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about Apple not having secrecy, Microsoft being super secret this year. I mean, we had Windows 8 consumer preview come out and a release preview, but then out of nowhere comes the Surface tablet, Microsoft entering the hardware game, and then thereby confusing all tech pundits going, what on earth are they doing? They're going to take off every hardware partner they've ever had by introducing hardware.
This was, well, and there was all of that complaining, like, well, they've done hardware before. They've done the mouse and they've done the Xbox, but this was going head to head.
This is a tablet device because Windows 8's interface is supposed to be touch first. It's supposed to be amazing. And this was also the introduction of the Surface RT and the Surface Pro, that bifurcated Windows line that confused many because Microsoft all year was doing a terrible job communicating the message as to what will run on what. I think it wasn't until the middle of the year that we knew that Windows RT would have a desktop, because this was a question for the longest time.
Was remember the big blockbuster announcement at CES was that they would make a version of Windows that would run on ARM, and yeah, those details kind of slowly trickled out over the course of the year.
Codename WOA, right? Windows on ARM. That's what we kept calling it until they renamed it Windows RT, which actually stands for something else. Used to call it Windows Runtime, which I believe later on in the year we found out Dell was pleading with Microsoft to not use the Windows brand on that because apparently the apps don't run on both platforms. Then in June, we had 2 days after the Surface launches, we have the Windows Phone 8 announcement showing the new start screen, different tiles, shared core with Windows 8, which means theoretically applications should be able to work between them, but they don't. They still haven't done that. It also showed a line where phones that existed with Windows Phone 7 no longer could get new applications. So Windows Phone 8 meant, okay, Microsoft drew a line in the sand, told everybody who adopted early, thanks for playing. We're going to leave you in the cold.
We're going to give you 7.8, maybe someday. We're still waiting on that.
It'll look like Windows Phone
Right.
8, but it won't function like that. And all your apps will still run, except the new ones written for Windows Phone 8 won't run. So that was kind of nuts. Then in August, Microsoft had a nice little facelift, a new logo. It's got it's very flat. It's got this really, I don't know, what do you want to say? This is a bland appearance? What would you say, Sarah? This is the look of Microsoft currently.
I don't know if I'd say
Clean.
bland. I'd say simplified.
Yeah, clean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so simplified, clean, bland, whatever you
I
want
have
to
to
say.
say, I was all like, whoa, I can't believe they changed it. It looks kind of weird. It's kind of, I don't know, maybe it's kind of boring. I totally don't even notice now
Right.
when I see it.
Sure.
It just seems like it's always been like that.
I think that's the mark of good branding.
Yeah,
That's a
probably.
successful rebranding for sure.
Well, that and like it's showing that the Windows flag is right up there, right? That's not the Windows logo. That's a Microsoft logo. So they have the Windows brand up there, and that was what Ballmer was saying all year. It's Windows all year. It's Windows, Windows, Windows. Then in September, we got some new phones finally. Nokia had the 920 and 820. Then, like a couple of days later, HTC becomes a Windows Phone partner, which confused a lot more people going, okay, wait a minute. Nokia is their best friend forever. Like, they will totally take care of Windows Phone 8. And then HTC gets the Windows Phone 8X.
But I mean, they can't just have Nokia do phones. They got to have more than one partner.
Right,
They always said they would.
And I believe Nokia themselves were saying that if Microsoft came out with smartphone hardware, they'd be happy with that because they want to see more phones out there with that operating system. And then finally in October, it seems like this has been around all year. October 26th, Windows 8 finally launches. And so it's out on desktops. It was available. Tile-based start screen, which confused lots of people. It seems like the learning curve has been pretty ugly. And then shortly
Really?
there-
Wait a minute now. Hold on. What did you say that again?
the learning curve's been ugly.
No, I don't think it has. I think everyone was afraid the learning curve for the tile interface was going to be ugly. I have not seen a shred of evidence that people are like, oh, Windows interface is so hard. Everybody just goes into the desktop. And it's like, oh, it's like Windows. It works like Windows.
Well, research from Microsoft says that it takes about 2 days to 2 weeks to get used to the new interface because it's this dual interface. And this is information from Windows new head, Julie Larson-Green, because Steven Sinofsky, who was behind Windows 8 all year, or actually for years, he left in November. So like less than a month after Windows 8 launches, the head of Windows, where people are thinking was going to be a CEO eventually, just bolted, which confused.
And you couldn't blame that one on a map. that was apparently, and we had Paul Thurrott on the show saying like he just was unpopular. People did not like to work with
So
Steve
the
Sinofsky.
Sinofsky Forstall rumors started going on like, hey, look, Forstall's out, Sinofsky's out. They
The
should
dark side.
they should join up to have the most unfriendly company ever. But yeah, it's been a crazy year for Microsoft. They just reinvented themselves, going with the look. We're going to run hardware. We're gonna have tightly integrated products. And there's been discussions of Microsoft acting more like Apple and having this vertical integration when it comes to their products, which is not something they've been doing before, other than in the Xbox.
I think more than ever, Microsoft it really turned into a comeback story. I mean, you could argue that that people have been saying that about Microsoft at least for the last couple
They've
of
been here
years.
for years.
Right. Well, they really have. But there were so many products that were announced, and a new OS, and it's just been one thing after another, which I know since we've been covering it on TNT on a daily basis, sometimes seems a little jumbled. Like Microsoft, holy crap, slow down. What is going on with all these partners and everything? But it has been a very exciting year for Microsoft.
They've had a very confusing and aggressive year.
Yeah.
That's what it seems like, because their message is, I have no idea what they're trying to say, but I see what they're doing.
Yeah.
They seem to be going back and forth because with the top management shakeup, it looks like Microsoft's trying to find a direction at the end of the year, even though all year they had one.
And the story's still shaping out too. I mean, there are a lot of mixed reviews about the Surface, about Windows 8. I think in the next 6 months, it's going to be a lot more clear if that aggressiveness was a good move on Microsoft's part.
My impression of where Microsoft is right now. This is not my opinion about Microsoft. This is my impression of what people think of Microsoft is they're way up front in their mind more than they've been in a long time because of all of this news, because of all of these announcements, because of all of these products. People don't seem to really love the Surface. For good or ill, it hasn't really caught people's imagination. They are paying attention to Microsoft more, especially regarding the Xbox. I think Microsoft is killing it on the Xbox. They could easily be passed up, but right now, when you talk about what is the best home media center experience that you can get off the shelf, plug into your TV, it's the Xbox, because you have great gaming, you have great television service, integrated with cable television in some cases. You have all of the major apps, Netflix, you have MTV just got added last week, along with a bunch of other channels. I mean, the Xbox is where Microsoft is excelling. Whether they can continue to excel there before somebody else comes, like maybe Apple or Sony comes in and sweeps them away, is a question. That is their consumer leading platform right now, though. I also think that Microsoft is steering towards becoming a solutions company and an enterprise company at the same way, and maybe it'll be a two-prong decision. But I don't know that Windows 8 has done everything that Microsoft wanted it to do. But I don't think it has been a failure either, the way people were fearing. I think it's just been an off release. If you have Windows 7, you're happy with Windows 7, you probably don't need to get Windows 8, and that's what Microsoft is experiencing.
Yeah, I completely forgot to mention Xbox Smart Glass was introduced this year. The front-facing brand for consumer stuff has been Xbox, rebranding all the Zune things. Xbox applications for iOS, Android, Windows. They're on everything. So they've been very aggressive as a software company as well. Forget about all the hardware stuff. Also the software side. And
Windows Phone has not done nearly as well as I expected it to do. It's great. Windows Phone 8 is fantastic, but they just have not got market share. Again, this isn't my opinion of what I think of the device. This is the fact that, at the end of this year, they still haven't hit 5%.
But it's also just, it has so much to do with timing. The smartphone market, it was all about, can Windows Phone gain a bit of market share that seems to be dominated by iOS and Android? And the answer is, well, I mean, a little bit, but not that much.
But when you step back, we talked about Apple, we talked about Microsoft. When you look at these companies, Apple kind of had a shoot to the top and fall back to earth sort of year. I mean, they had the pinnacle of their stock price where they were like the most valuable tech company ever, and near Exxon in overall valuation. And then they've started to come back down to earth. Microsoft, on the other hand, stock price doesn't really tell the tale, but this is definitely a company that is risen over the course of the year. Maybe not as high as a lot of people had wanted, but they've got forward momentum going into 2013. Let's take a break and thank our sponsor for today's show, Ford. Ford has developed various available technologies to collect vehicle data and use it to enhance and improve the overall driving experience. Two examples of this are Bliss, the blind spot information system, and Active Park Assist. Now, let me tell you how Bliss works. You can find your Bliss in Ford with the sensors that are in the rear quarter panels. They scan potential blind spots to detect traffic. And if one of those annoying people is driving in your blind spot, I hate that when I'm on the highway, audible and visual alerts warn you, hey, there's somebody hanging out over there. Don't forget they're over there if you're going to change lanes. Also features cross-traffic alert, warns the driver of oncoming traffic when you're backing out of a parking space. You got the big truck that's parked next to you and you can't quite see around it. Another helpful technology is Active Park Assist. So when you're doing parallel parking, I know a lot of people hate parallel parking. We kind of get used to it in the Bay Area. But you don't have to think about it with Active Park Assist. Just calculate the trajectory, steer the car precisely into the spot in as little as 24 seconds, less than half a minute. All the driver operates is the accelerator, the gear selector, and the brake pedal. Don't forget that brake pedal. It's clear that Ford is staying on top of new technologies to help improve the overall driving experience. Bliss, with cross-traffic alert and Active Park Assist, are available in the 2013 Ford Fusion and the 2013 Ford Taurus. And you can learn more about this and other technologies Ford is bringing to its vehicles at Ford.com/technology. We thank Ford for their support of Tech News Today and all the shows on Twit all year long. Let's talk a little bit about Google. There's lots of googly stuff to talk about, but of course we have Jason Howell is our producer and also the host of All About Android. Tons of Android news this year.
Yeah, and going over kind of all of the different points throughout the year, I realized pretty quickly that this has just been a great year for kind of the maturation of the Android platform. The past few years, it's been successful in probably debatable depending on your perspective. But this is really the year that kind of the experience on an Android device has really become competitive with a lot of the other platforms. But if you kind of go back in history to earlier in the year, Google closing their deal with Motorola Mobility, which has yet to really kind of surface as far as like what that actually means long term. We're still in the early stages of that.
Seems like they've had them forever, but that was just this year that it closed.
Yeah, exactly. It started, you started to hear about it a little bit last year, and it finally closed. I think that was May of 2012. If you remember, a few pretty important patent cases from the year. There was the Oracle case against Google, and that involved kind of the Java code and APIs, and it wasn't looking very good for Google. Along the way, you kind of wondered, like, what's going to happen to the platform if they lose to Oracle? Well, ultimately, Oracle ended up losing pretty significantly, pretty much entirely to Google, and ended up dropping the case entirely.
That was the World Series of patent cases at the time. It would later be eclipsed.
Yes, it would.
But yeah.
Which was strange to think about. And honestly, when I was going back and researching this stuff, I was like, oh yeah, that's right, the Oracle case. I kind of forgot about that because the patent case you think of is, of course, the Samsung case with Apple. That was then basically in August 25th of 2012. Of course, Samsung lost pretty miserably to Apple in just regards to a whole slew of patents that Apple kind of holds. Samsung had a bunch of patents that they went to the case with to try and enforce against Apple, and weren't able to get any of those. So it was absolutely turned upside down for Samsung. I think one of the big stories related to that this year is just the fact that even though all that happened, this has been an amazing year for Samsung in Android. When you take a look at the Galaxy S3 and the success of that, they've done. They basically...
Well, they dethroned Nokia.
Yeah.
They have risen to the top of the smartphone heap, mostly based on Android. They do put phones out with other operating systems.
But they've really made a mark with Android.
Exactly. What is driving most of their domination is the Android-based phones like the Galaxy.
Yeah. So, and again, the patent case and the kind of after effects of that still have yet to completely, I guess, shake out ultimately, but I think Samsung has kind of already worked themselves around most of the issues there anyways, and I think a lot of the devices ultimately were just old, so it didn't really matter as much. But going back a little bit, Google I.O. this year was kind of a really big announcement-filled I.O., maybe more so than it has been in years past, but obviously one of the big things that caught people's attention was the Project Glass demonstration on stage with people jumping out of airplanes.
Sergey Brin's "I'm gonna let you finish" moment,
Yes,
where he just ran up on stage like, "I'm sorry, we have people jumping out of a Zeppelin right now."
And oh, by the way, I didn't tell anybody about this.
It was not an airplane; it was a freaking Zeppelin. They jumped out of and landed on the roof of the Moscone Center. That was insane.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was very cool to be there too, and just kind of see this all happening, and just the vibe in the place and everything. It was completely unexpected, and a good representation of kind of what to expect out of Glass if and when it ever kind of hits public hands. But beyond that, just kind of getting back to the Nexus family. Nexus, I think, just this year has taken a big step up. The Nexus 7 tablet, which was announced at Google I.O., I think it was a pretty important tablet for Android. It really kind of, we've heard of Android tablets up to this point, but none seemed very competitive to the big daddy in the room, which is the iPad.
It does feel like the Nexus 7 was the tablet that made Android break out and become a competitor to the iPad for the first time.
The big thing about the Nexus 7 was the affordability. It was really low cost. It had a pretty good build quality. I own one. It had stock Android, and you could see what Android could do instead of seeing, okay, what kind of skin are you going to put on top of this? Because at that point, with the Nexus 7, that version of Android seemed pretty tablet ready. The interface before was kind of kludgy when it came to that. Honeycomb was kind of okay, but with 4.0 and 4.1, these were much better when it came to a tablet interface. And that 7-inch form factor, I think it just made it an easy purchase for a lot of people because it's small enough, but large enough that you can do lots of different things with it. Also, if you have smartphone applications on it, it doesn't look too bad because the tablet market, I still think, on Android's a little weak compared to iOS, but it's a heck of a piece of hardware.
Yeah, and it was a good kind of entry point for a lot of people who had never used Android before. Now there's suddenly a low-cost tablet, A, but B, one that has a lot of really positive kind of feedback and talk behind it. So I think it was people's first kind of entrance into Android to a large degree, and it was a great device to do that. It also had Jelly Bean, which was kind of another big deal this year. When Jelly Bean was announced at I/O, and after I had a chance to play with it for a little while, I made the comment on All About Android that I almost thought Jelly Bean was more important than Ice Cream Sandwich. Ice Cream Sandwich did a lot to kind of bring the user experience and the UI up to a new level. Jelly Bean did so much to smoothing it out so that just the everyday person could pick it up and wouldn't notice those weird little quirks.
And some phones
it would
even
just be
come with
fluid.
Jelly Bean now.
And what's that?
You can even get it on some phones now.
Yeah, a couple. Now, and more and more. Actually, Jelly Bean numbers are definitely rising a little bit faster than they were at Ice Cream Sandwich at the same point. So I guess that's positive. It's still a very slow climb. Google Now, I think that had a lot of
people probably don't know what Google Now is, so explain that.
Google Now is essentially, it's built into Jelly Bean going forward, and it's some people hesitate to say that it's a Siri kind of competitor, but it's kind of a similar thing, right? It taps into the Google kind of information base, all of your searches,
but it's not.
Your
you
location.
don't have to use voice. It's not like Siri.
You don't have to use
voice
voice
activated,
right? And in fact, people will also correct that Google Now isn't the voice component. The voice component is just voice search, but it taps into the service of Google Now, which essentially presents cards to you based on what Google thinks might be important to you at any given moment.
Well,
and it's very powerful.
As an iOS user, it's built into the iOS version of Google Search. It's the voice search portion of it. They don't call it Google Now, and it's great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's better than Siri in certain ways. It's very fast. The voice is nice. I've had a lot of fun with it.
And it anticipates what you want without having to ask.
Right. If you've asked a couple of times, what's the Giants score? It'll figure out which Giants you're talking about. That's the first one. If you're in San Francisco, odds are they're talking about baseball. Or if you're from New York, you're going to be talking about the football Giants. And those cards would just show up as you would just go into the Google app. It was the Google Now experience, from my experience, has been pretty interesting to see. Oh, yeah, I do need to check the weather right now. I do want to see how the Yankees did. I do want to see how these things were going on, although it was a pretty rough year if you're a Yankees fan.
Well, it's super powerful, and I think that's what we've realized. When it first came out, my initial reaction was, oh, this is an interesting gimmick. I wonder if it's one of those things that sounds great on paper, looks great in a demo, but as you use it, you're not going to be very tied into it or want to go back to it. And I think I've been proven completely wrong. Everybody that's kind of started to use the Google Now regularly has realized just how powerful tapping into that knowledge base that Google has based on you as a user can be to your day-to-day life. And that's totally the promise of Google Now. So it's pretty important. And yeah, I guess just finally the Google Nexus family. Of course, this is all Android related, but that's all I researched. But the Nexus family that was introduced to the Play Store October 29th. If you remember, they had an announcement that was timed shortly, I think the day after Apple's announcement. And of course, Hurricane Sandy happened. So they had to postpone, or they had to put that off entirely, and they just ended up silently with a blog post releasing the entire Nexus family. And that would be the Nexus 4 by LG, the Nexus 10 by Samsung. And by and large, they've been great devices with a lot of hype. I'd say the one downside to all of this is that Google has really shown in selling through their Play Store how not good at it they are, through lots of shortages, a really kind of crummy customer service experience. They have a lot to learn as far as selling their devices online.
Then, of course, there's all of the regulatory problems that Google has gotten into with FTC investigating them and Europe investigating them. Google has become Microsoft of the late 90s in that respect. They are big and they are dominant, and everyone is worried that they're throwing their weight around too much. Larry Page took over as CEO and has focused the company this year on fewer projects, but doing those projects better. Sergey Brin really relishing his role now in charge of the X Lab. And don't forget that Google actually is also involved in something that now I can't remember what I was going to say.
Many
It's
things.
been a long year.
Fiber.
Fiber, that's exactly what it was.
Oh, yes.
Google Fiber. They rolled out Google Fiber in Kansas City, and they
They have this crazy fast network, and it's showing themselves to be quite adept at putting together this infrastructure in these towns, and the sign up structure when it came to the Google fiber project, it seemed like they required a lot of effort by the community for this to even work, and the turnout was amazing, such that I believe something like 80% of the communities that were they're possible to get fiber actually did.
And then don't forget that Eric Schmidt said at the end of the year, Google's going to try this out somewhere else. They're not gonna be one and done with Kansas City. They're looking at other places. They might try to push into the ISP business, and that's got to shake up a lot of the ISP business right now. As more and more municipalities are running fiber, Google now saying they want to run fiber, and Verizon saying we're not going to run fiber. They've said that for a couple of years now, that it's too expensive. It's really getting interesting how, at least in the United States, we're going to get higher speed broadband rolled out. All right, let's finish up with the rest of the stuff that happened. Starting with the Yahoo merry-go-round. Don't forget, it was in 2012 that Scott Thompson took over as CEO of Yahoo.
Yikes.
Oh, right, in the resume issue.
Yeah.
That was this year, huh?
Though it was before we even
before
get to
that.
the resume issue. He took over.
Yeah.
He started in January as CEO of Yahoo.
Didn't last very
He
long.
was the new face. Yeah, and then by the middle of the year, there was that whole resume gate about the fact that he claimed in a profile that he had a computer science degree, and he did not have a computer science degree.
In hindsight, now that we've got Meyer at the helm, doesn't that all sound so silly?
Oh yeah.
Like, really?
Like, what?
Everyone freaked out about a couple of fudged resume. Anyway.
What's the luckiest break for Yahoo all year?
Right. It's
Yeah,
really
no
true.
kidding,
And
right?
Marissa
It's really
Meyer
true.
shows up for Alpha Google. Like, that's a huge
That's
shift.
so
What
true.
a risky move that was for Meyer to leave Google from at the top and then go, oh, by the way, I'm going to head up this company that for years hasn't had a direction and nobody knows what it does. She's going to give them a direction.
I think she's such a strong product person and saw such an opportunity to make Yahoo something. Yahoo, I think we all said, it's like, well, they can't fall any farther than they have right now. If she does anything good, everyone will call her a hero. And even in the last several months, we've seen a huge product push at all facets of Yahoo.
Yahoo is starting to make sense again.
Yeah.
Now, granted, she hasn't done a lot yet
Right.
in her tenure there, but I can't think of anything she's done wrong. The relaunch of Yahoo Mail has been uncontroversial and generally thought of as good. It just people don't use Yahoo Mail as much as they used to. Flickr's new app was relaunched.
And that's
It's
strange because
fantastic.
suddenly everybody's supercharged about Flickr again. Like that, in the short term anyways, really worked.
I just renewed my Flickr Pro account.
Yeah, I'm seeing more and more
did.
people doing
It's been over a year.
Well, that sounds.
It's a bit. I mean,
I
it's
forgot
like
about that.
all of a sudden I'm like, for a lot of different
They've
reasons, I
struck
think
a-
I want this to be my photo place.
They already had a partnership with ABC News, but they also struck partnerships with CBS and NBC. NBC for sports and CBS for some entertainment news. So this, we should save some of this for the prediction show. But Yahoo, something to watch in 2013. Also, don't forget January 18th. 2012. It was that long ago that websites like Reddit, Wikipedia conducted the internet blackout to protest SOPA and PIPA. When we were coming into 2012, it was doom and gloom. SOPA and PIPA are going to pass. It's going to get railroaded through Congress, and it's going to change the way the internet works in the United States. And they went down in flames. Not only that, but every politician backed far, far away from those. And we've seen CISPA, which was a cybersecurity thing that a lot of people tried to compare to SOPA and PIPA. We had the World Telecom conference at the end of the year, which a lot of people said, oh, it's like a UN grab that's kind of like SOPA and PIPA. But honestly, those were very stretched comparisons. Nothing like SOPA and PIPA has been presented in the U.S. Congress since then.
Yeah, and SOPA and PIPA brought out a passion in people. It seemed like the apathy that was around when it came to
This is in dedication to our coverage
a
of
long
SOPA,
time
if you
ago.
remember.
Such a long time ago in January that I was black and white back then. But it seemed to like strike a chord with so many people that I like how many Twitter avatars do we see switch, stop SOPA, all these kinds of things. Maybe it's just the circles I'm running, but it was very prevalent and discussed pretty much everywhere I was looking.
We also landed a robot the size of a small car on Mars using a sky crane. That happened August 5th. Probably my favorite moment of the year. Just sitting there and waiting for that tone to be sent back from Mars that crazy contraption had worked.
That shouldn't have worked. It just sounded like a crazy plan.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
mean,
like,
it should have
Right,
worked
right.
because they planned it very carefully and all of that. But yeah, when someone says, "Oh, we're gonna have this entire thing happen automatically," there's gonna be no human involvement, and it's gonna take a sky crane and land this thing gently, and it's kicking. It's out there running around doing science, still alive. It's
It
amazing.
was a
Twitter.
big space year. We had the space jumper too.
That's right. We had Baumgartner, Felix Baumgartner.
That's right.
Jumped out of
insane.
That was the
Wow.
that was like
and landed on his feet.
wasn't it the most concurrent live YouTube views
Yes.
of any event ever?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was one of them.
I was as well. This may not get a lot of attention in a lot of year in review shows, but MakerBot Industries released the Replicator 2 3D printer. So this was the first site. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be a hobbyist. This is the kind of commodity 3D printer that you can just buy. It's still a little expensive, but it's not expensive as they used to be. You just plug it in and print things in 3D, 100 micron resolution printing, and they opened a store in Manhattan. In fact, several companies opened 3D printer stores. So slowly, I think we've moved out of the Altair era for 3D printers and the Heathkit era into sort of the Apple One, maybe on the verge of Apple II era, the late 70s era of analog to PC.
Well, even Staples is getting in the 3D printing game. I mean, this year I think it's in overseas that they're going to have options for you to print things at Staples in 3D. So I mean, it seems like 3D printing has gone mainstream.
Yeah. October 7th, SpaceX launched the first private resupply mission to the International Space Station. It didn't have any people on it, but it was successful, even with a rocket burning out on launch. So it proved its redundancy. That's the beginning of private use of space, which is an important step. October 30th, I think, blew all of us away when Disney and George Lucas announced that Disney will acquire 100% of Lucasfilm, including ILM, LucasArts, and Skywalker Sound. And that new Star Wars movies, not really a text part of the story, but new Star Wars movies coming out starting in 2015 with Episode 7.
It wasn't enough that they bought LucasArts. They're like, oh, by the way, we're coming out with 3 more Star Wars movies, which was just blowing up people's brains. And then you had this crazy idea. You saw all these memes, right? At that time, all the mashups when it came to Disney and Star Wars, like Boba Fett at Disney World. Actually, there's a bunch of art doing that, but it was just nerds, I don't know, either get panicking or super happy.
Yeah. And then amongst product releases, we talked about a lot of the big product releases from Android, from Google, from Apple and Microsoft. Nintendo launched the Wii U, the first of the next wave of game consoles here in North America on November 18th. It still hasn't gotten its TV service. We're waiting for that here in North America. So some of that stuff is on the Japanese version. Was a 5 gigabyte download. Took over an hour to update the console software.
And
at
some
launch.
pretty mixed reviews again. I mean, I know you got a Wii U and had some issues with upgrading at home, and even some of my really diehard gaming enthusiast friends say, I tried, I just don't know if I want to use this thing.
Yeah, it's a. If you don't have a Wii and you want one, buy the Wii U. No
Sure.
reason to buy the old one unless you just want to save the money. But if you have a Wii, not sure what the case is to buy a Wii U. Unless you
think
just have to have the latest games and they will only run on it.
Yeah, it's more than ever Nintendo
The Link
struggling to release dedicated console, not only consoles but accessories that make people want to buy those instead of just running games on a variety of smartphones and tablets and that sort of thing.
Lots of patent disputes that we didn't cover. We covered a couple of them. Lots of other policy stuff. The debate over net neutrality seemed not to be a big one this year, but the bandwidth cap debate has become top of mind. I think that was discussed more over the course of the year than anything, which is the fact, especially on wireless plans, that they're putting in these restrictive bandwidth caps. Although in the U.S. we did see all of the major carriers move to some sort of shared data plan, and in the course of that, they made the bandwidth caps less punitive. It used to be you'd get a small bandwidth cap, and if you went over that cap, they would just charge you out the rear. Now it's a more reasonable. Well, if you go over the cap, first of all, we're going to warn you. I actually got a warning this weekend from Verizon because I had left my iPad on tethered to my iPhone, and it was doing app updates. And I used like half my monthly allowance. there. But if I do go over, it just charges me at a higher rate, but a more reasonable rate.
Right.
Yeah.
And those wireless companies using those shared data plans, so you could leave your unlimited plan if you were grandfathered in, because there was no way to avoid them. It was like, oh yeah, we have these great new plans, but by the way, you're gonna have to give up your unlimited, because I think there's only 2 left now. I think T-Mobile and Sprint, the only ones that do unlimited at this point. Verizon and AT&T, that's all dead.
Don't forget that the T-Mobile AT&T acquisition fell apart, and then T-Mobile is now back on top. They actually acquired Metro PCS
As the uncarrier, that's what they're saying, because they're not subsidizing phones anymore.
right, and they don't do cola.
That's right.
Also, Sprint backed now by SoftBank, so they've got a little more, and they're acquiring Clearwire. The Twitter API debate will rage on into the new year as Twitter gets more restrictive, and I think I'll see what Instagram is big news right now at the end of the year because of all of their changes. Do you think that that's going to continue, or is that just going to fade away?
Well, it is huge news right now because it is the perfect storm of Instagram changing their terms of service to basically say, if you read the fine print, we can now sell your photos to advertisers, but you won't actually get any of the proceeds if we end up doing that. So in essence, you don't own your own photos. We can do what we want with them. People freak out about that, but then there's a lot of the overreaction. I now have to quit Instagram and go somewhere else. And I just feel like it historically, a lot of that is talk and not action.
I mean,
Instagram did get bought for $1 billion. Facebook had their IPO.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, I forgot about this was this year that all the rumors of Facebook IPOing finally happened.
Right.
And they did acquire Instagram for $700 million.
Well, it was
at
$1
the end of
billion when they started, and it was only worth 725 or
Right.
whatever by the time it actually got approved.
because it was tied to the Facebook stock
Yeah.
price, and that seemed to fluctuate wildly. And I think the IPO was considered botched by many. So that was early this year.
And Netflix didn't die over the course of the year. They've actually stayed
they've
alive,
gotten-
stayed on top. They got a partnership with Disney.
They've gotten the SEC mad at Reed Hastings every now and then.
Yeah,
That's
well.
par for the course.
That means you're doing your job. No, I guess. I don't know. And finally, probably the most important story on the internet, at least this year, Gangnam Style became an international hit. And I think we all agree that
Needs to die.
what we will remember about 2012.
Oh, come on. Carly Rae.
I've never watched-
Overside.
Really?
Any day.
I've
Call
not
me,
watched the video
maybe.
for that actually either one yet all year.
You haven't
Yeah.
watched Gangnam Style, or so you're culturally illiterate, is what you're.
No, I've
you're
heard this
bragging
music,
about here.
but yes, I haven't seen the videos.
Yeah. All right. well.
That's right. I'm enjoying being illiterate. Don't use.
That is it for our year in review. Thanks everybody for hanging with us all year. Now, tomorrow we will do our prediction results show. That is where we look at our predictions from last year's prediction show and see how well, or in my case, not well, we did. And then following that will be our predictions show where we'll make our predictions for next year. So thanks everybody for watching or listening. You can find us on the web anytime you want, twit.tv/TNT. We're just sitting there waiting for you. Come visit us. You can also email us, TNT@twit.tv, and give us a call at 260-TNT-SHOW. We'll see you tomorrow.